speaking of, I guess, kind of diet variation, I've talked to different people. I've talked to Dr. Mindy Pelz. I don't know if you know her. She's all about fasting. And I've talked to a few other people, and they're very much on the camp of like the week before your cycle, that's when you have your carbs, and you should go hard on, keto or your fasting or whatever in the first 10 days of your cycle, maybe take a break during ovulation, and then, the last days before your cycle, then you have your carbs. But do you feel like that's a good plan, or does it kind of have to be individualized?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has to be individualized. I don't change my eating pattern based on, where I'm at in my cycle. I just don't. I think it's too confusing, for
Yeah.
patients as well. I mean, and a lot of them for me are on, some sort of contraception anyway, and we're not really tracking cycles. So I just think that's a confusing way to try to teach people. I mean,
Yeah.
I, I have trouble teaching people what a carb, a fat, and a protein are, let alone when to eat what and how much and, whatever. Like, we have to make this simple.
Yeah.
Like I had just right before I got on this podcast, somebody messaged me, okay, I think I'm going to try the ketogenic diet, but I'm so overwhelmed and I don't know where to start. It really shouldn't be that overwhelming. We've made it so complex.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, be your own expert. I don't know, add some complex carbs in. How do you feel? Did it make you,
Right.
feel better? Is it getting you closer or further away from where you want to be? Be your own expert, because we all respond a little bit differently. But I don't change my diet based on where I'm at in my cycle. But certainly in the first half of my cycle is where I could tolerate more carbs, go harder in the gym. Second half of my cycle, I got to dial it back a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, if I was to do carb cycling or try that out, I feel like I have such a history with like addiction and sugar addiction, food addiction. And I've talked to a lot of people that are like this, that they have a little bit of rice or they have a little bit of that carb, and it just sends them into a spiral. And I'm like, that's the last thing I want for people who have worked so hard to get where they are and get into this lifestyle, that they go and they're like, I'm going to carb cycle this week, and it just totally sends them off.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And on that same note, because you mentioned fasting, I think the fasting card has been overplayed a lot at the poker table recently.
Oh, yeah.
It's a tool.
Yeah, that's probably why I lost my cycle was.
Yeah. And I don't think everybody should do it. And I don't think everybody should do it all the time. If your goal as a woman, because my, message to people is like building body mass, right? And at the level that I train and at my current body fat, I should not be fasting. I just shouldn't.
No.
And I think it's okay.
No.
I think it's okay to do, maybe like a 24, 48, maybe a 72-hour fast a couple times a year or something like that. But I see people get into this, like, I'm like, it's like a badge of honor. Like, I've been fasting for 60 hours. And the problem is that, you may start to lose lean body mass. And I really see women in particular, back to this idea of intuitive eating, I've seen intermittent fasting push women into binge and restrict behavior. It's like they fast, and then all of a sudden when they start eating, like, they can't stop. Like, whenever they've opened their eating window for the day, like, they're consuming a boatload of calories, and you can still do that in a short window. And you kind of brought up that idea with the carbs. And I do feel that way as a former, I'll be an admitted carb addict myself. As soon as I start, let's say I open a box of almond crackers or something like that, they're like low carb.
Oh, Lord.
I can't stop. Like, I can't be trusted with the box. I totally agree with that. And I think part of it is that kind of the mental health aspect of, and I see people in the keto space, a lot of them came from disordered eating, whether it was like binge behavior or anorexia or bulimia. I mean, I've seen a lot of people in this space that had former eating disorders, and that's, it is a big issue. And I don't think there's such a stigma associated with it. And I wish people talked about it more, transparently, because I have eaten in my pantry, I have like made sure my husband was gone. Like, I have been there before, where you're like, no one will see this. No one will know I'm doing this. Like, that is messed up. And that and there's people in the space probably doing it, and they're not putting it on their social media because they want people to think they live this finished product fairy tale world. And no one does, trust me. No
No,
one does.
no, no.
No.
Yeah, people know that when they follow me, they know it can be messy at times, and I
Yeah.
typically will tell people what's going on. And I feel like you can't really trust the people who are perfect all the time and don't ever have a problem. And I was able to do this and feel great. But going back to, I guess, the fasting and the variation, I do see women, and I experienced myself, lowered progesterone doing carnivore all the time. And for me, the trick was, and it won't work for everybody, I had to go super high in fat. And the week before my cycle, that's the only way that I would not go and binge was like, I just have to make sure I eat like a ridiculous amount of fat if
Mm-hmm.
I want to stay on this way of eating. So for women that, that you see that do keto or do carnivore, or low carb eating, that are starting to see a decline in those hormones, and it's not necessarily correlated to, perimenopause, getting older. It's just like that's directly correlated to the diet. What kind of advice or program would you give them?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so what happens, like, in your situation, it is when somebody goes carnivore, it's easy to eat a ton of protein, right? And when we
Yeah,
look at, what ketosis really is, it's like 20% protein. And,
right.
when you start just eating ribeyes and chicken and all this, you're eating tons of protein. And it's hard to add the right ratio of fat and protein in there. I'm struggling with
Hmm.
that right now, like currently, like right now with my coach. Robert Sykes is coaching me in
I
this Mrs.
love
America
him so
prep.
much.
And I'm literally like taking MCT like oil by the tablespoon, and he's like
Yeah.
less protein, and I'm like I'm so used to eating high protein, it's hard. But our sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, they're made from cholesterol, right? So you'd think this diet full of this great animal cholesterol, right, would just like pump out all these hormones, but it's not true when you're eating a ton of protein and you're not getting that fat in there. That's basically what we call a protein sparing modified fast,
Yep.
where you don't restrict protein, but the energy calories, fat, and carbs are super low. And for women, that can be very detrimental. I think men can get away with it pretty easy,
Yeah.
but women really can't. We're reproductive creatures. And you got to kind of listen to your body a little bit in that situation. And I think where carnivore works is for people with autoimmune conditions. I mean, I've had patients have great success with it, but I always tell them the goal is let's go carnivore for 14, 21 days, whatever it is. And then let's start adding a few things back in and see how you feel, see how your body kind of responds to those things. And you'll find certain plants or vegetables that you tolerate just fine.
Hmm.
Because the gut microbiome changes in about 10 to 14 days. It's rather rapid, and so you're going to know rather quickly if somebody is, responding well to it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the danger, again, kind of what I said earlier, is that we start feeling really good and we feel like, okay, this worked for 30 days. I need to keep doing it. And you do it for a year. And then, you don't have a cycle anymore. And you're like, well, maybe this isn't working out. And this
Yeah.
isn't, you stay in that kind of gluconeogenic state all the time,
Yeah.
not really in
The
ketosis or.
body, the body is so adaptive. And so my diet's never the same. I mean, I'm always changing things. And you bring up this word cycle, right? It's like, think of it like we have seasons, we have life cycles, we have like everything is a cycle. And so I think it's good to like, you know, be in ketosis in the winter and then in the summer have more berries and squash and whatever. And then, oh, you want to do 2 weeks of carnivore? Great, do 2 weeks of carnivore and then go back to paleo. I mean, I think it's always good to change things up and kind of find your rhythm. And, we naturally kind of find that rhythm around social events and things like that. I mean, I think you still have to live your life and make memories and you just got to figure out what works best for you.
Yeah, I think the message is stay with the whole foods, real foods. Like you
Exactly.
said in the very beginning, if it doesn't come from the ground or have a mother, then don't eat it. And we have to stop being so dogmatic, especially when we start, getting those test results back or we stop feeling our best. We don't have energy. I have so many women that are in my private group that are like, day one, I'm like, what are you guys struggling with the most? And they're all like, we're not sleeping. I mean, just the not sleeping. I'm like, well, are you, and half of them were doing OMAD and had been doing OMAD for
Yes.
months and months. And I'm like, why?
Yeah. Yeah. And you brought up progesterone. Progesterone is a great hormone for sleep. It will really help you sleep
Yes.
well. And there's a place for hormone replacement therapy. You know, I don't know how old some of these women are, but there really is truly a place. And I think in kind of the keto carnivore world, people are so like anti-medicine. And it's
Yes.
hard for me because like I walk this fine line of I tell people I'm, you know, boarded in integrative medicine and immediately I'm a quack. And then, you know, on the other flip side of it, like I'm board certified in Western medicine and I'm immediately evil. So I'm always trying to like walk on both sides of the fence. And hormone replacement therapy isn't like, it's not like statins. It's not like these other, you know, Western medicines. It's
Yeah.
literally, you know, you really should think of it more as like it's like biohacking. It's a
Yeah.
recovery modality. Um it's in a different world, and so people shouldn't be afraid of it if you're a good candidate. But yes, sleep is a huge one, so important, and it's a very underutilized tool in people's toolboxes.